Just a few years ago, a new whiskey company came on the market and pretty much blowing the distilled spirits arena, if you will, right out of the water. And here's the guy that was responsible for that and still is to this day. It is Jeff Arnett. Jeff, good to see you.
Great to see you as well.
Jeff is the master distiller behind Company Distilling. First of all, it's good to see you. A little bit about your backstory before we get into this. You started off your career by grading and classifying coffee of all things.
I did. So that wasn't really what I dreamed of doing when I was in college. I wanted to work in the automotive field, but I grew up in Jackson, Tennessee, and Procter & Gamble had a Duncan Hines cake mixes and frosting and Pringles plant there with a great reputation. So I just dropped a resume with them. They sent me to New Orleans to the Folger Coffee Company. So I was there for about 4.5 years, and that plant did all the coffee buying for Folgers. There were several plants that made coffee, but because it was close to the commodities market, we would send somebody across town. They would pick up a pound or two of all the different coffee beans coming into the country, and then we would bring them in, roast them, grind them, brew them individually, and then class and grade them. So kind of learning in coffee language, you know, flavor, acidity, body, what makes a good bean, how do beans have differing properties, how do you put them together to create balance. So I learned sensory sciences first in coffee.
And once you got that under your belt, you took that to your next position, which was?
So Procter & Gamble started selling off all their food brands. So I worked at actually 3 different plants for them. But there was an opening for a quality control manager at the Jack Daniel's distillery. And,
now, who among us wouldn't love that job?
It was a
quality control manager, right?
Quality control manager. So I basically oversaw all the quality, literally from the cave spring water that started the process all the way through even answering consumer comments on product that was made years in, in the process of making it. So I had a really good, I would call it 10,000-foot view of everything that it took to make Jack Daniel's. And then the master distiller prior to me, Jimmy Bedford, after about 40 years with the company, announced he was going to retire, and they came to me and said, we think because of your quality background that you would be the appropriate guy to take over. So I was very honored.
No, I don't want to do that.
Well, I think the main thing, as I had young children at the time and they needed me to travel, and I knew that traveling was a part of it, Jimmy chose to travel a lot because his daughter was grown and gone. But I traveled about 20% of the time, went to 41 different countries, introduced 8 new products into the portfolio at Jack Daniel's. So it was a very active time there, and I had a great run.
Which was a really cool thing because up until just very recently, he was widely considered to be the 7th master distiller for Old Number 7.
So, and the 6th that preceded me covered about 144 years of history. Or something like 142, I think it was.
And my first one goes back to Frog Bobo, Mr. Frank Bobo, whose grandson is now the master distiller.
Chris. Chris served as my assistant distiller. You know, he grew up there in Lynchburg. So in a way, I was a little bit of an outlier, even though I'm a native Tennessean. I was the first master distiller that I felt like wasn't a family member, and I didn't grow up in the shadows of the distillery there.
There is a whole lot of science that goes into making whiskey, and you may think, nah, but trust me, there's a whole lot of science that is involved in this.
A lot of art too, but science is, science for sure.
It's much like barbecue. You got to marry the art and the science together. What you have done since you have been at Company Distilling is simply amazing, and you started this along with a couple of other gentlemen. First of all, I got to ask you, why the name Company Distilling?
You know, I left Jack Daniel's in the fall of 2020, so I don't really want anybody to have to think back long and hard about that time, because for most people it was not a good time. But it was the peak of the pandemic, and a lot of bars and restaurants had been shut down. So if you were going to be around anyone, have any social time at all, you had to maybe have company come over, again, to borrow an old term from my parents. The word company, a lot of people think of it as where they go to work and where they earn a check, but company originally was those you break bread with. That's what it meant. And we felt like that was going to be an important thing, not knowing what the pandemic would bring. If you couldn't afford to put 50 or 60 bottles of whiskey in your cabinet at home, but you wanted to serve something nice, somebody who might be a new drinker, somebody who might be a mature drinker, is there one bottle that would serve them both? I called that approachable complexity. That was the problem we wanted to solve, and that's really was the inspiration behind our first offering. As
one who has spent decades in the industry, what is it you're looking for first and foremost when you're trying a whiskey?
You know, one of the things I like about whiskey is that unlike vodka, all vodkas are supposed to taste the same because they're flavorless, colorless, and odorless, and that's a pretty absolute description.
Absolute. I see how you slid that in there. Very good.
But and I have a vodka brand I call Nothing, because it's supposed to look like nothing, smell like nothing, and taste like nothing. But whiskey, what I like about it is, based on whether, if it's Scotch whiskey or if it's a Kentucky bourbon or Tennessee whiskey, they're going to be very different based on grains, barrel types, and stuff like that. So I just love the range that we can create.
Do you mind if we taste a little bit of
I
this
would love it. I poured something for you. We got a spittoon here since it's early.
We're going to take a quick time out. We're back with more of Jeff Arnett, Master Distiller for Company Distilling, right after this.